Hello, and welcome to this Easy 11 Plus live lesson on descriptive writing. As always, the worksheet for today's lesson is linked in the video description, which is down here on YouTube and up here on Facebook. And don't forget to take a moment to look through the other links in the video description. You might find something there that's useful. If you find this lesson useful, please remember to like and subscribe and click the bell button if you haven't already. And don't forget that these live lessons and my short videos that I post from time to time, and I've got some more short videos for English and maths coming up over the next few weeks. Right, so today's topic is descriptive writing. Hello Sanjay writing, what was that, Robert? Just having fun. Anyway, so let's get on to looking at today's task. So you've probably already seen the worksheet for today's lesson with this, and some of you may indeed have had a go at writing this descriptive exercise. And if you haven't had a go, hopefully at the end of this lesson you'll feel inspired to go off and do some writing of your own. This is a typical kind of task from the CSSE 11 Plus exam, which is a kind of exam that they take in Essex, but it's a really useful bit of writing practice for anybody who has to write 11 Plus or for anything else. Because when you get these tasks that ask you to describe something in a really concentrated way, these tasks force you to focus on the detail of your writing skills and really make the most of them. Now, let's look at the question itself. So write 6 or 7 sentences describing one of your friends for a person who has never met them. You should talk about their physical appearance and their personal characteristics. So it's describing this person to somebody who doesn't know them so that they can form a picture of them. And we need to talk about how they look and what they are like. Now, I wanted to start off by just firing off a few thoughts about how tasks like this often go wrong, because I find that a lot of people don't have the right idea about how to do something like this. So I've just got a few notes here. It isn't everything, but I think it's some of the main things. One of the things that people do so often with these things is that they list lots of facts. And so basically they say they have brown hair, they like to go-karting, they're good at maths but they don't like English, and so on. And it's just a list of information like that. And there are a few things to say about this. One thing to say about it is that it's really boring to read and it doesn't show off your writing skills, because you could write a list of facts about anybody and it wouldn't be particularly inspiring. Instead, what you need to do is allow the reader to imagine this person in their own mind as though they are somebody who knows this person, if that makes sense. And going with that, one thing that people often do is put down lots of ideas that aren't really connected together. So we get lots of little snapshots of this person, but we don't get enough to form an overall picture. Now, if you could give lots of little snapshots of a person over several pages, perhaps there'd be enough to form an overall picture. But when you've only got 6 or 7 sentences, if you just give a few random bits of information that don't fit together, what comes out of it won't be a person whom we can really imagine. Yeah, writing massive sentences. That's specifically when you get a task like this. It says write 6 or 7 sentences, and people think, right, I'm going to do this by writing sentences that are 6 lines long each, and that way I can get a full story length out of it. That isn't the task. Yes, sometimes a sentence might be a bit longer if you want to link some ideas together, but you still need to punctuate naturally and not just start sticking the word and in where a full stop should be, for example. Right, I think that'll do. That's a few things not to do. Let's think about what we can do. Now, initially, I was planning with this lesson to do what I've done in the past with some creative writing and actually write an answer in front of you with you. But then I thought the writing pack this came from in 11 Plus Lifeline, you can find out more about 11 Plus Lifeline linked in the video description, already include another one here. What I would do is I would talk through those example answers and try to explain the thought process that went into writing them so that you can learn how to do the same thing yourselves. So you have these example answers actually in the worksheet that you've printed off for this lesson, but you don't need to look at that because they're going to be on the screen in front of you here. Okay, so this is one about Jean, who comes from France. So let's think about what you need to think when you first see a question like this. So, in my opinion, the first thing that you need to do is form a clear picture of the person you're writing about in your head. Now, it might be a real person whom you know, or you might feel that you can write more creatively, more interestingly, if you imagine a fictional about somebody. I wasn't writing about a person whom I know, and I actually think it's often easier to write effectively in these things if you're writing a bit of fiction rather than writing about a real person, because then you're not limited and you can follow your ideas wherever you want to follow them without thinking what is actually true. So when you've got not to write a detailed plan, and that might sound a bit controversial because normally with a story you'll want at least a rough plot outline, but this isn't a story, it's a description. And if I say I'm going to make these 4 points, then there's a great risk that my answer will become a list, because I won't be linking them naturally. I'll be thinking, right, I need to say this thing, oh, then I've got to say this thing, and so on. What I prefer to do is form a strong image of this person in my mind and find a really good starting point, and then allow my ideas to flow. You might say it's a slightly riskier approach, but if you're confident with this kind of writing, it's by far the best way to get an answer that really hangs together and makes sense when you just need to describe in these things, as I've said, by writing a fact and then writing more facts until they get to the end and they've run out of facts. So I decided to play with that idea a bit. So I do start with a simple, rather boring fact. Jean comes from France. Now, what might somebody naturally say next? They might say, but now he lives in, I don't know, somewhere, Slough. Or they might say, and he's very proud of this, or something. And I think the second idea is more interesting because we're getting into character and emotion. So I could write, Jean comes from France, and telling the reader, how can you help them to imagine him for themselves? So you can say something like, Jean comes from France, and he wants everybody to know this. And now we can imagine somebody boasting to everybody about their background and where they come from and how he's a very proud Frenchman. Who, as we'll see as we go on, somebody who likes to present themselves as being rather sophisticated and elegant and a little bit better than the other people in this class. Perhaps it isn't so much that he really wants everyone to know it, but I don't mind if you know. I'm not going to try and do a French accent. And I think that's a much more interesting way of describing it. So we've gone from he's proud of it, he wants everyone to know it, but then we thought about the character, imagined the person and thought, no, he doesn't mind. Oops. Says me what I'm trying to draw on the screen. He doesn't mind if everybody knows it. And now we've got a little hint of his character. He really wants everyone to know, but the way he presents himself is very laid back and debonair. And now I thought, okay, what would we say next about somebody? But what's important about the clothes that he wears, rather than just listing them? Well, what's important about the clothes he wears is that he always tries to be individual, and he hates to be the same as other people, wear the same school uniform, look similar. Instead, he wants to do something a bit different. And so what does that? How would we say that in English? What's the idiom? We'd say he stretches the rules. And that's quite an interesting idea because clothes, of course, you put them on, they can stretch. So there's a kind of link of ideas. He stretches the uniform rules as far as they can stretch, and sometimes a little further. So we're taking a really commonplace idea and adding a little bit to it to make it a little bit more interesting. To pull it a bit further and it's almost going to rip, that's what's happening with his attitude to the rules. He pushes them so far that you're just waiting for the big disaster. Sitting down in class, he gives an elegant flick to the sky blue scarf, which might as well be glued to his shirt collar for all that we ever see him without it. Now this is where somebody else could have written, he always wears a sky blue scarf, and he never seems to take it off. Now that would be the listing facts approach. But what can we do to take that idea and actually suggest something about personality? So there you need to think about what somebody does. So this is the thing about writing. You always need to be asking yourself questions. He's wearing the scarf. They'll be doing something with it sometimes. And so that's what I asked myself. And I thought, well, if he's like this, if he's rather proud and feels a bit superior to other people, he sits down in class and he gives it a little flick, which might as well be glued to his shirt collar for all that you've ever seen without him. So rather he always wears it, I imagine it's like it's glued to him. And so you start to get a bit of sense of the author's personality and their curiosity about him, but also the way that they don't quite understand why he's doing these things. This is not from the point of view of somebody who can tell you everything about this character. This is somebody who's also intrigued by them and wants to know more. And that's likely to make the reader intrigued as well. So another really useful tip for your writing is think about the perspective of the person who's telling the story or who's describing a thing, and think about how you can use that to build up the reader's interest. And one time he even came to school wearing a black beret. Now, you remember I said at the beginning that you shouldn't write massively long sentences unless there's a really good reason to. Here I think there is a reason to, because I'm trying to convey the narrator, the person telling the story, their sense of kind of amazement almost at the way that Jean behaves. He never takes it off, and one time he even came to school wearing a little black beret, which is so surprising, and the "and" really emphasises that, the way the sentence runs on. Again, look at the little details that make this a little bit more interesting than saying he once came into school. But I think "even" is a really strong word here. He even came to school shows how surprising this is. Far this must have gone beyond the school uniform rules. But the whoops of laughter, so again, rather than saying everybody laughed, whoops of laughter is much more interesting, when he walked into the playground, seemed to cause him a few doubts. Now, there's lots of detail in this phrase. First of all, seemed reminds us of the narrator's perspective, that they, like us, are looking at him and trying to understand him. And that makes us try to imagine him as well so that we can understand him. Seemed to cause him a few doubts. So, didn't make him change his mind and run away. And it didn't suddenly fill him with self-doubt. It made him wonder a little bit. Are these people laughing at me? Why at me? Could it be my hat? But no, it's not possible. And so you get a sense of somebody who's thinking that way, someone who really struggles to imagine that the world could be looking at him from any point of view apart from sincere admiration. And the children laughing at him put paid to any last hopes Jean might have had for his headgear. So again, this is taking an idea, Mr. Brownlee said take it off, and it's playing with it a little bit humorously. His less good-natured intervention, well, it's not, the children weren't good-natured, they were laughing at him very loudly, so we can imagine from this that Mr. Brownlee absolutely got really, really, really angry. I hope the video is still coming out okay. I can see some lagging on the transmission. Fingers crossed it's okay. Anyway, sort of conveys the narrator's own slightly dismissive view of this. And that's a point I really want to emphasize again, that you can do a lot with your creative writing by developing the character of the person telling the story through little hints, as well as describing through the way that they describe the thing or the person that you're writing about. And now we shift on to something a little bit different, apparently. He's the tallest boy in the school, so this seems to be a new development. And I suppose he cares a lot about the top of his head. We're still talking about headgear, because it always stands out above the crowd. At any rate, he's come to terms with the beret problem by focusing on his hair, which he now keeps perfectly parted on the left. So you could say, it's just telling me more about what's on his head. Goodness, we have the scarf, the hat, the hair. Who, for all that they might come across as a little bit annoying, they're very self-possessed and very determined and very oriented towards finding solutions to their problems. So he thinks, I'm tall, everyone's going to see my head all the time. The beret's not going to fly. So what can I do about my hair instead? So then he makes it super neat with a perfect parting on the left. If I do that too much, you'll see all the bits where there isn't so much hair anymore. To me, it always looks disconcertingly like a zip. And this at the end is just the kind of perfect mockery of this. Open up his head and look inside, which when you think about it like that, is really gory and adds a kind of surrealism and makes the character seems a little bit ridiculous. So this narrator, the person telling this story, is pretty much making fun of Jean, but in quite an affectionate way, to make an interesting impression of himself, to present himself in a colourful and sort of inspirational way to the world. And I should say, by the way, that the fact that Jean is French is coincidental to this. I'm not making any comment about French people. It's just the inspiration that I began with. Now, thinking about the structure of this has really been a piece very much about Jean, and yet we get a whole sense through this of how he interacts with the other children at school, of what his relationship is with the teachers. In other words, that he's very confident in doing things they will definitely not like, but yet feels rather bemused when actually they turn out not to like them. And so we find out a lot of different things about Jean's personality through little hints, like the way that he doesn't mind if everyone knows it, through the way that the laughter only seems to cause a few doubts, the way that he still seems to have hung on to some last hopes up until the point when the teacher intervened. Then it must be the hair. And the way that the person talking about it, while some slightly less obvious level, actually to rather admire the character that he's writing about. Now, I think it's really important at this stage to talk about structure, because it will be easy for you to listen to what I've done there and think, well, there's no structure then to a piece of descriptive writing like this. You just link ideas together and then you get to the end. But that isn't actually what's happened here. There is quite a clear structure to this piece. And I wonder whether you agree with me about what the structure is that turns out. So I think that there's an introductory sentence. Jean comes from France and he doesn't mind if everybody knows it. And we've spoken about what that suggests about his character and why that might be an interesting beginning. And then we start with a clear, sometimes a little further. And then I start to add some examples to back up this idea. So when he sits down in class, he does this with his scarf that looks like this. And there's this strange peculiarity that he never seems to take it off. Then I give the example of the beret, and I use that to illustrate his relationship with the other people at the school. And then there's a period of development. So then, when things go wrong, and he can't wear the beret anymore, at this point of crisis, how does he adapt? So then we in this part of his body, and how he responds in a way that tells us a lot about his personality. To me, it always looks disconcertingly like a zip, which gives a kind of comic finale and balances the introduction sentence that we had at the beginning. So a crisis event happens, him being told he can't wear the hat, and his response to it, and then a conclusion. So even though this is just a piece of description, and even though there wasn't any particular plan going into it, through thinking about it from the narrator's perspective, we've ended up with a very natural narrative, which always uses facts as part of points about personality, which doesn't make too many statements about his personality, but instead gives the reader information from which to draw conclusions, and so on. And what I like about this piece, if I can say so, I did write it, but what I like about this piece is the way that there's really just one idea leading through it, basically what Jean wears on his head, but out of that we managed to gain a kind of a really rounded, if incomplete, picture of this person's personality as well as their appearance, which is what the question has asked for. Okay, that was maybe a bit waffly, but I'm now going to go on to the next one. In fact, rather than going straight on to the next one, let's take a quick pause and go briefly I reckon this is a good way to break it up. So I had the idea of asking myself before this. I was thinking, which is the one topic in maths that is most fundamental at 11 plus? If there's one thing that you should make sure is really strong, what should it be? And thinking about this a bit, my conclusion is that the one area that you should make absolutely certain that you are completely solid on is fractions, decimals, and percentages. Understanding them. Percentage, can you turn it into a fraction in its simplest form, or into a percentage, or into a decimal, I think I said, and so on. All those ways round. Can you perform basic operations with fractions really reliably? If I gave you two fractions, one of which was a mixed number, and asked you, there's one thing, particularly if you're somebody with September exams, so they're coming up fairly soon, that you should really make sure you're really steady on. Go back to your fractions, decimals, and percentages, and make sure that doing things with them and converting between them is really solid, because that comes up in so many other topics and so many styles of questions. It could easily end up being 2/3 of your 11 plus maths exam when you really look at it. Something to think about. If you have a different opinion about which maths topics are most important, I'll be really interested to hear about it in the comments, because a bit of controversy is always good, and I am most certainly not always right. Okay, let's carry on with the next example answer here. So we've spoken about Jean here, and then we got my discussion of it underneath. And I haven't just repeated the same points, I think. So it's well worth reading my discussion in you agree with my ideas. And if you've got different ideas, I'd be really delighted to see them in the comments. Let's see whether I can fit all of this on one page. Yep. That's a bit better, so I don't need to scroll around. Okay, so this one is really different. So what I've done with this one is something slightly different. I've tried to give it a little bit of a twist, so that you get the sense of how even the most ordinary seeming people can in fact be really distinctive and really worth a lot of attention. So that was the basic idea behind it, and I'll leave it to you to judge how well I achieved it. So I thought, right, I want someone who's really, really, really ordinary. So what's really ordinary? The kind of person who does all the stuff, is always there, turns up to all the lessons, does all the clubs and so on, and yet the person you never really notice. The person who doesn't stand out the most, but also the person you don't notice from the fact they're always hanging back and hiding away. They're just Mr. or Miss Normal. So Anna is one of those people who tries everything, misses out on nothing. So you're thinking, wow, this is a really energetic, enthusiastic person, but does it all so unassumingly, that means without making a point of it, that sometimes it's easy not to notice that she's there. So again, we're looking at her from the point of view of the narrator, who's saying she's always there, but often I don't even really need to sit at the front or the back of the room, but somewhere in the middle, always to one side. Now this is a really simple bit of information. It's not really where she sits, it's what happens when she walks into a classroom. She walks into the room, and you know that feeling when you walk into a classroom and you're thinking, where do I sit? Do I go at the front? Do I go at the back? Do I sit next to them? And she's always thinking, not at the back because people are noisy and, annoying there. Not at the front, I might get too much attention. Sit in the middle, but the teacher always kind of points to the person sitting in the middle. So to the middle, but to one side. And that way, I'm as far out of the way as I can be. So you start to imagine the kind of personality who might do that, and to make some assumptions about them. Whether or not those assumptions turn out to be right. I can see a lot of people saying that the video is not coming through well, that it's buffering and lagging, and I really apologise if that's the case. I'm afraid at this point there's nothing I can do about it while I'm already broadcasting, but I hope if that's what you're experiencing. Now, where were we? Always to one side. The kind of girl who doesn't wear her hair long or radically short, but in between. Now again, this is one of these things that's emphasising how trying not to stand out, trying to be normal, in fact involves a lot of active decisions. Because getting your hair at that perfect length where it's not showy-offy long, but it's not sort of, so short that it's making a point, is actually quite an active decision. Just like sitting in the part of the class where nobody really notices you, to something a bit different will be kind of radical. It might be a little bit uncomfortable. Really, really wants to do. just enough for a ponytail, but not so that she can sweep extravagantly from one shoulder to another, like the front row girls do when they want to attract attention. So this is telling us about other people, but in doing so it's telling us about her, because we're sort of seeing things from what the narrator imagines to be her point of view, if that makes sense. There's a few layers of removal there. That she's the kind of person who would look at the sort of people with their swishy hair and would think, not my kind of thing. Maybe sort of looks down on them a bit or is secretly a little bit jealous of them. It's hard to know. But she's someone who's very different. And we've got these words here like extravagantly, radically, describing other people, and so giving us a sense of how she doesn't perceive herself to be. Notice the punctuation of this sentence. It could be two shorter sentences. Instead, I've got the semicolon in the middle after the word side, which makes it a little bit of a list. It's a list of two things. She's somebody who does this when she sits in the classroom. She's somebody who does this with her hair. It's showing that these two things are part and parcel of the same personality, of the same kind of worldview that we are building has helped us to imagine this person, but in quite a distant way. Like the person telling the story, for us, she's someone who doesn't seem that noticeable. She's the person who, sits in that place, wears her hair in this way, but we don't really have much of a view really inside her. Anything that makes her stand out and makes her individual. That's the whole point. So we're learning a lot, but at a distance. And I said the idea in this piece was to build up someone who seems very normal and then introduce a little bit of a twist. And that happens with the magic word but. And sometimes the simplest words are the most effective, not on the other hand, notwithstanding the above, just but. But there's something. So as she goes through her daily life, she will seem as normal can be, and yet when you get her face to face, there's something interesting flickering there. And dances, I think, is quite a vivid verb here. It's not the most original way to describe a kind of life in somebody's eye. And you should really bear in mind that when you're describing things, sometimes one of the more effective things you can do is to introduce a degree of doubt in the reader's mind, or a degree of uncertainty. There's something there. And that forces the reader to imagine what it might be. It also suggests to us that the narrator isn't quite sure. So it's quite an effective thing if you don't overdo it. Something, someone, a glimpse in the corner of your eye is always more interesting and exciting than something you actually look at directly and can describe. It's as though she's already seen into your thoughts. Whoa. And they are. There might be a kind of horror, depending what your thoughts might be. There might be a sense of superiority. There might be a kind of fear at, discovering what people are like. It might force you to keep your distance. What's she like? It's as though she's already seen into your thoughts and finds it funny that you haven't yet found the words for what she knows you're going to say. Now, of course, the narrator doesn't actually know that Anna is thinking this. This is somebody whose eyes are bright with intelligence as they look at the narrator. But it's a kind of intelligence that's got something a little bit edged about it. Because she looks at you, she's happy to be looking at you, but she seems to be reading your mind, and less intelligent than her, that not only has she worked out your thoughts, but she's also found the way to express them in her mind when you haven't even thought of a way to say them for yourself. And now we got a switch to a new idea. So you can go to something completely new. You don't need to just put factual sentence that lots of people put in these pieces of descriptive writing. And facts can be great. Just don't let your writing turn into a list of facts. But perhaps even more importantly, when you give a fact, give it for a reason. Do something with it that makes it worthwhile. So here's the fact. If she hears a thing once, she never forgets it. Okay, now if someone always remembers things, what might the effect of that be socially? How would you feel about somebody who remembered everything you'd ever said? She'll happily quote back to you an embarrassing thing you said without thinking 3 years ago. Okay, so that would be really awkward. How would it feel? Well, if it was an embarrassing enough thing, it might feel quite painful. Skewering you so casually that it seems she hardly knows she's done it. And the word skewering, like sticking a skewer into somebody, good thing I did that with a pen or I'd punch a hole in my computer screen, is a really good way, well, I don't know if it's a really good way, but it's a way to convey that almost painful feeling of when someone's so intelligent and so knowledgeable about you that any time they want to, they can say, how can you possibly be saying this now? Or, really? Well, I remember when you did that. And these things that just give you no comeback apart from screaming and running out of the room. Skewering you so casually that it seems she hardly knows she's done it. So on the face of it, this seems to be saying that she does it really by accident. She's not trying to be nasty. She just comes out with these things because she's so insightful and has such a good memory, and doesn't really recognise how uncomfortable they can be for the doubt word. I spoke about something earlier on being a word that creates doubt in the reader. Seems is a word that shows the narrator's own doubt. She doesn't seem to be not being nasty on purpose, but maybe she actually is. Seems she hardly knows she's done it. Well, hardly is a funny word, isn't it? If she hardly knows she's done it, then on some level she obviously does know that she's doing it. And even if she isn't a nasty person, there's definitely a part of Anna that loves being able to make people feel uncomfortable and root them to the spot in a conversation by coming out with things that nobody else could possibly have come out with. And then we got the concluding sentence. Someday she'll rule the world. Whoa. Okay, so this narrator, for all that Anna makes them uncomfortable, for all that she doesn't seem to stand out in every way, thinks that this is a truly exceptional without anybody realizing it. And what this conclusion is doing, it's wrapping up the two sides of what we've got here. The first half of it says this person is really ordinary, and it even helps to take us into the decisions that make someone seem so ordinary, the way they seem to really hide from seeming exceptional. And yet, as I think is the case with many people who outwardly seem ordinary, there's something else going on there. That's the someday. There's something else going on there. Is the someday she'll rule the world, but they're seeming really in the shadows. Again, there's quite a simple structure to this. There's an introduction. Anna is one of those people who tries everything, misses out on nothing, but does it so unassumingly that sometimes it's easy not. Got the added examples, just like in the piece about Jean. We've now got examples to back that up, which help to fill in what ways she comes across as so ordinary. And then this is where the structure is different from the Jean piece, because now we got the twist on the word but. And then the sentence is something in her eyes that's not normal at all. And then there's the development of the twist to really fill out this other side of her personality and show this stark contrast between this really sharp and almost slightly intimidating person and the apparently shy and retiring girl we encountered at the beginning. And then we got the conclusion in the very last sentence that ties those two halves together. And it's really quite what she might be thinking, but also looking at her directly and imagining what she might be thinking about them. So there's a bit of a kind of mirror game going on here, but not too complicated. And really it's just filled in with little glimmers of language. Simple things. Something. Seems. But also unassumingly. And such like. So it's really quite a simple piece, I think, but I hope it does something that's reasonably effective. Let's just do a quick recap of some of the things that I have been talking about in this session. So, don't just plunge in and list lots of character traits. If you state a fact about someone you're describing, then head for examples. But when you have an example, he presents himself, might be a scarf, but then ask yourself questions. What does he do with his scarf? He flicks it. What does he not do with his scarf? Always not questions are interesting. They can bring up lots of ideas. What does he not do? Take it off. So then he has this scarf, he likes to flick it elegantly, he does not take it off, and now we've got a whole kind of idea about the scarf that we can expand. You might ask yourself the question, how do other people react to him? And then we've got the incident with the children in the playground, then developing that, you imagine, so we bring a teacher in. So now it's like a bit like we're plotting a story. What happens then? Okay, how would you respond if your favourite thing you were told by a teammate? I almost certainly would respond by going, okay then, and never doing something like that again. That might get me into trouble because I really hated getting told off at school. Still do, really. But he's quite different. And that makes him interesting because he responds by thinking, right, if I can't do that, what can I do then? So asking questions throughout builds it up. Giving examples and developing, giving examples and developing them with questions. Scarf, what does he do with it? What does he not do with it? He goes into school, how do people respond? If the children respond this way, how do the teachers respond? When that happens, what does this person do in response? How does that thing look to the narrator? And it's the questions that give the narrative. Have a sense of structure, even as you follow through your ideas in this way. Think about a good, clear way to introduce something simple. Think about a nice way to round off at the end. If you can, it isn't essential, but it really does help. So looking at the stories here, the Jean story I did with, I can't remember it, lots of talking and not much remembering. Yeah, to me, it always looks disconcertingly like a zip. So there's that rather macabre, surreal idea that he might actually have a zip in the top of his head. The Anna story ended with, someday she'll rule the world, not story, descriptive piece, someday she'll rule the world, but without anybody realising it. So they wrap them up, I think, reasonably effectively. After the really fairly simple structure, giving an idea, developing it with examples, then introducing a new element. I realise that I couldn't possibly have covered every conceivable. I know that you have very different writing styles, you'll have different word choices, different structures to your sentences, you'll think about people in completely different ways to me, and you'll have a completely different experience of people whom you've met during your lives. So you will write very different pieces. I'm not in any way saying that you should write things like the ones that I've written, but I hope there are enough ideas there to inspire you. And I'd be really interested to see your ideas, things you come up with here. If there's anything that you want to post in the comments, it would be wonderful to see some of your... You can actually put your answers in the normal comments rather than the live chat comments that are going on at the moment, and then everybody will be able to see them there, and I'll do my best to go through and write some feedback on your descriptive piece if you paste it into the comments there. Loads of people are putting descriptions in the comments now. Let's look at what Josh has put. Amar looks not as clever as he really is. Poor him. He likes football and keeps the ball for most of the game. He even won the relay. Sometimes he even forgets that he won the game for his team. Okay, so my first thought about that would be that you could maybe develop some of those ideas a little bit more. It's the ball for most of the game. Okay, so then what questions might you ask? So for me, the most obvious question there is, what happens when somebody else comes up to try and take the ball? And if you can add another sentence that answers that question, then you'll really start to give some insights into his character. Okay, he loves hogging the ball. Playing football is all about him and about what he can do. And he isn't really interested in playing it as a team game. So when someone does come up and suggest that the ball should be passed to them, what does he do? Does he kind of huddle away, the ball by his feet? Does he move to the touchline and try to sort of shepherd the ball along? Does he think, I'm not the other half? What does he do? Or does he snap out of it and, oh yeah, I'll pass it to you? And that would be the other side of his character. Yes, he becomes self-obsessed and focused until somebody snaps him out of it. And then he can be, as nice and considerate as the next person. So this is less someone who's egotistical, different. So, come up with questions. What happens next? Okay, speaking Oh, there's another one here. Okay, I'm going to talk about one more and I'll go to your questions. So, Strawberry Plays says, Ellie, my friend who has thick, straight chestnut hair, has sapphire blue eyes. She has light pale skin, unique freckles due to her face. She has a button nose and always wear pretty dresses. Okay, these are lovely details and I really like them and they help me to visualize it. I think you could develop these a little bit more rather than listing them. So you start off brilliantly, my friend has thick, straight chestnut hair and sapphire blue eyes. Okay, so then ask yourself a question about a question. So let's say that, well, let's find out what her attitude is to her hair. So when her hair is tangled up and sweaty after sports, what does she do? Is she somebody who just goes, sticks a hair tie on it, as you can see I do with my luscious long locks, my long luscious locks, more orthodox order of adjectives, run off to the lavatory and stand in front of the mirror and work at it for 10 minutes until some member of staff gets angry and drags them out. So as soon as you've given a factual information, ask yourself a question about it and use the answer to that question to develop the character a bit. Okay, let's get on to questions. Of course, we need the jingle. Okay, how long is the grammar school test? It really depends on which one you do, I'm afraid. There isn't a simple answer to that. Robert, you are glitching. I know, I'm sorry. Lots of people have commented that there's something wrong with that their connection is rubbish. She is quite discreet about it. Interesting. Yes, you're doing a kind of opposite to Jean. I like that. That could go somewhere really interesting. My dad has black liqueur head with brown nutty eyes. Okay. Lots of people beginning with physical descriptions, which is absolutely fine. I'm really interested in knowing what the next sentence is. What do you ask yourself, and then what do you do with that? Adam wants to know, Robert, did you pass the 11 plus? I don't think I did an 11 plus exam, which may sound like a strange answer because I really should know, shouldn't I? But at that age, I was at the same school for the very end of primary school and the very beginning of secondary school. So exam at that point. So I actually don't know the answer. That was the King's School in Chester. Hello to anybody who's aiming for a school in Chester. Yeah, so I actually don't know the answer. I'm sorry. Okay, sorry. Do you mean which school did I write the 11 plus for? In which case I've just answered it, I think. It's a completely valid question, but it's also an absolutely enormous one. So I am going to say, watch lots of the videos on my channel and explore some of the links in the video description. And I think between those two places, you'll find a lot of things to help you. In terms of vocabulary specifically, I did a Q&A session week before last, so that'll be Easy 11 plus 14, I think. And one of the first questions I answered was about developing vocabulary. It was also the tip of the week in either my first or my second Easy 11 plus live lesson, so you can look back at that as well. And if you want to go straight to the tip of the week, there should be a time link in the video description for that video. Robert, are there essays at the 11 plus? Asks Goku. So it depends what you mean by essays. If you mean pieces of these and so on, then yes, often, though it does depend which 11 plus exam you're doing. If by essays you mean, well, what I usually mean by essays, in other words, you have to make an argument to write a piece arguing before and against that and giving a conclusion, it's pretty unusual because it's a school that sets a story but they give you a choice. Or they set a very short essay task, a kind of mini essay where you might only need to give one side of the argument. There are a few, I think probably just independent schools, that do occasionally include an essay topic for 11 plus, but it's really, really difficult and it's an important writing skill, and if you can get ahead on it, it'll be an enormous advantage at secondary school, but probably not something to worry about too much in terms of your exam. How long is Reading Boys exam? I don't know the answer to that question. I'm sorry. You're more likely to get side. If you really need to know, your parents can always send the school an email and ask them, and they might even answer. I got comprehension, says JTAK Girls. That's absolutely amazing. Many congratulations. I'm delighted for you. Wow. Lots of people asking about particular schools and particular formats. I sometimes know the answer and sometimes I don't, depending on the school. But really, in all these cases, my advice is go onto the school's website and look at the admissions section, and it should tell you about it. Also, if you take, someone said Sutton there, if you put Sutton 11 plus exam format into Google, you'll find lots of pages from various organisations which list the format. Often they're tutoring companies or whatever, and they're using these pages to get you onto their websites, but you can ignore that and just use the information on their site. That should answer these questions. So sometimes my answer is really use Google, and it's your friend, and it's better to do that than to have me guessing an answer and maybe getting it wrong. Another one. Kelly is a brainy person who always puts her hand up in class. As she walks, everyone gawps at her long black locks and wishes they had hair like her. Her brown eyes have a glimmer of mystery. Excellent points, but they're 3 completely separate points. Could you instead take the first one and then develop it by asking yourself a question about it and doing something interesting with that? I think that's a real theme. A million times, do you know the school QEGS, which is Queen Elizabeth Grammar School? And it's the same answer I just gave. I don't particularly know it, but you'll find much more detailed information via Google than you will by asking me, unless you happen to luck out on a school that I really know. Do you think this year's exam is going to be easy because of COVID? I'd be surprised. I think they did make some changes to the exams last year. I don't know the answer to this, and it could be that someone has read some articles about this and can contradict me, but my guess is it's probably going to be pretty normal. Jasmine, I like what you want, and they'd say she is a fashion diva. I really like that opening because it's from you're imagining the perspective of other people. And that gives an interesting perspective rather than just saying she is a fashion diva. So I like that opening very much. Her flaxen hair scooped up into a neat ponytail. Fantastic verb, scooped. Really good. I like it because it shows, you can have a really fashionable, neat ponytail that you spent half an hour on, I imagine. But she's someone who's just gone in the way I showed earlier, and scooped really conveys that. And that's interesting because it seems to be a bit of a paradox. Fashion diva, yet she just scoops her hair like scooping a bit of ice cream. So what is it? Are you saying she isn't really? She's actually casual about it, but she manages to give a different impression. It's really intriguing. I like that. Her grass green eyes shimmer like an emerald, and her extravagant attire stand out in the crowd. Really nice details. Her flaxen hair, scooped up into a neat ponytail. Emeralds. There can't be one emerald because there's 2 of them. So her grass green eyes shimmering like emeralds, and her extravagant attire stand out in the crowd. So with those slight changes, it works. I really like that opening. I think it's got a lot of promise. If I can pick favourites, I think of the ones that people have posted in the comments that I've seen. That's my favourite one so far. Okay. Jonathan, I like that. It looks like a story opening, but that's no bad thing. Gives a bit of direction. I'd be interested to see how you could turn this description of John turning in his black business chair into something that really props up a description rather than just a story or a narrative. By the way, you don't need a comma between black and business, because a business chair is what it is. Business isn't really functioning as a sort of separate adjective. You need a comma in that list. I haven't explained that very well, but have a think about it. I think you'll know what I mean. Okay. I think I'm going to wrap up in a second. There's a lot of comments coming in here. Thank you, Goku. I'm glad that you love my videos, even when I waffle on a bit like today. I really appreciate that. Keeps me going. How do you improve in comprehension and vocabulary? I answered that earlier on. What will you do next week? I haven't decided yet. If you have requests, write them in the comments. Most of the videos that I do now are responses to requests. I did this topic today because someone asked for it. So ask me for things, and even if I don't do it next week, I will probably do it at some point, as long as it's to do with the 11 plus. Has got some excellent details in, but it's a list. So take the first thing. Ridwan is a Muslim with black hair and black eyes. Ask yourself a question about it, Don't write the question down, ask yourself a question about that, and then use the answer to write your next thing. So you're developing the ideas in a way that's interesting and a way that follows. I'm going to wrap up there. Fantastic. I hope that was useful. I feel it wasn't my most focused lesson, if I'm to be honest. It was a little bit round the houses waffly, but I hope you got something useful out of it. Anyway, it's been lovely to have you here, and I hope I'll see you back next Tuesday evening at 6 o'clock for my next Easy 11 Plus live lesson. In the meantime, please like and subscribe and click the bell button. Take a moment to look through the links in the video description, including the free things that you can get by email if you sign up for them. There was a technical problem earlier today, but it works again now. Have a look through the other videos on my channel. And I think that was about it for the moment. So, see you next week, and goodbye.